Okay, so here are my plans for the week, and for language, I've kind of split it up into two groups. So I've kind of got my letter sound group, who are the students that are still kind of learning the letters, the sounds, the difference between sounds and words. And so I've taken from them some things that I'm going to really be targeting this week, and this would be the part that would be happening more during direct instruction, and then there'll be an option for then some follow-up writing, where that will give them a little more of the choice part too. But hopefully will allow them to put in some of the things that we've been learning about in the small group. So we'll be working on some specific letters and sounds. We're going to try to kind of learn it in the context of reading, so the reading that they're doing, and some little books, and kind of looking at the letters in the words as well as the whole word. And then kind of creating some of their own little stories that they can then read back, making up words, and again, as I said, looking kind of at letters versus words. And then we also have my writing group, which would be the group of students that do know or know most of their letters and sounds and are now kind of carrying it over into the writing. So in this group, I'm trying to get them to use more letter sounds and familiar words in their writing, as well as expand on some of the ideas. So we'll be doing a few little mini lessons this week, and what I really want to focus on is looking at them kind of expanding on their ideas orally by talking and telling the story first, and then being able to take those ideas and put it back into their writing. So for my writing group this week, we'll also look at some different text forms. So last week we looked a lot at lists, and we'll continue to look a little bit at lists, but I would also like to move on to the idea of stories. So looking at how they can write both. A lot of them are starting to experiment with stories, but looking at that problem and solution. So what could be the problem? How could the problem get solved, and how can they put it in? And then looking at the reading piece. I want them to read back the writing that they're doing so they can also start to hear the errors, but also getting them to look more in small groups with me at reading strategies that they can use to help read unfamiliar words, because a lot of them, their strategy is to still just look at me. So kind of coming up with that, and also for some students focusing on phonemic awareness, which could involve rhyming, where we hear the sounds and words, blending the words together. So we'll be focusing on some various things, kind of depending on where our testing said that the needs were, then we'll focus on them accordingly. I also want to work in a little bit of science this week, a little bit more. Some of the students have been writing about it. The topics kind of keep coming up from the things that people are bringing in, the stuff that's interesting them, some kind of overlap into some animal stuff and what they do in the different seasons. But now I'd really like to really kind of hone in on that first science unit and get them to develop some of their ideas. So I thought that since we had learned about Explain Everything the other day, that we would use that. And I've taken some pictures of things that happen in the different seasons without actually labeling the seasons, and getting them to look at what they see, what they think, and what they wonder, and really trying to get students to look a little bit deeper at it so that we can kind of narrow the focus during the week in terms of them starting to look at specific seasons, the types of things that they enjoy doing during those seasons, which season may be their favorite based on some of these things, and starting to also explore some of their wonders. So I'm hoping that this will also work its way from my writing group into some of the writing that they do, but also during that additional literacy period that we have, spending a little more time looking more specifically at that science component. So then for math this week, our big focus on math is looking at understanding numbers, counting, and number recognition. I'm noticing that this is a big area that students need to be working at. We did do some stuff with patterning, especially during our Play-Doh store, but some students are still finding it more difficult to create their own patterns, or they're creating really simple patterns like the simple A-B pattern, and I want them to kind of expand beyond that. So one of the things that we're going to be doing this week is kind of looking at some different options when it comes to the patterning piece. And what I'm going to try to do after kind of chatting online about some options is I'm going to look at integrating the arts and really introduce them to this learning goal, which will hopefully help kind of focus their learning. So we're learning how mathematicians use different tools to solve and explore real world problems. And so on Monday, I've set up some different provocations for them, or I will be setting them up on Monday. And these ones, the students will be able to kind of pick the one that they go to, but they're going to be overlapping with the idea of a bakery, construction and sewing, and kind of making things. I shouldn't just say sewing, but things that connect to actually making and creating things. And I'm hoping that this will also help them link to people that use math and how they use math. So that kind of gives that real world component, which will hopefully just help kind of explain why we're using it and give a little more of the context. It's also going to allow for some oral language, which will be good because that will increase the talking, increase the understanding. And then we're going to do a lot of creating and reflecting. So in this particular case, with the bakery, we're going to be looking at the ideas of groups of 5s and 10s. That's really where we're going with it. And then that will kind of lead into the counting piece. For the construction, it will be kind of given a specific number of the blocks which they're going to have to use to construct, so like a load of blocks and how they can do it, and then counting and making sure that they've used them. And then when they look at some of the pictures to start their initial discussion, there is also a look at the pattern and how they put blocks on top of each other to create that stability. So I'm hoping that that will kind of come up as well. And then for the sewing one, it links to a poem that was actually in the Nelson kit, but looking at the idea of the 30 buttons going on some toys. So I do have some little toys at school, and the idea is, okay, well, where could they put the 30 buttons? First, getting the 30 buttons, and how do they know that they have 30? So that could be where they kind of explore the different math tools, but then looking at the different arrangements they could use to put all of them on the specific toy. And on Tuesday and Wednesday this week, we're going to look specifically at the link to music. And this is also neat because often when we link to the music part, we also get into the patterning piece as well as the counting. So when I was looking through the music curriculum and the expectations and things, I saw things about how students could write their songs using popsicle sticks and the little cubes. So I thought, oh, that would be a neat way for them to see. And I wanted to give them something to write their song about in terms of feelings. So we could also kind of build up that language component. So I thought that we could look at some abstract art and talk about how it makes them feel, kind of come up with some feelings together. They could pick a piece of art, and then they're going to have to actually write their song, count the number of beats in their song, and then figure out how they're going to play their song given a wide variety of instruments and things, and which ones would they use based on the feelings that they want it to elicit in other people. So this will kind of be like a 2-day one, and we looked at how to actually do the writing, how to keep track of it. So this is where you can get into kind of the one-to-one correspondence piece, which is always good. And then the idea of playing it and how will they keep track of it there, and the fast and the slow and the patterns and things that come out of it from there. Okay, so on Thursday, we've already done a bit with visual arts, and now we're really going to look at math in the visual arts and looking at some paintings, especially some abstract paintings. This will again be a nice little link to oral language, which is always good, but also how basically after they've kind of discussed the math that they've seen, and we can use our anchor chart to kind of help guide some of that discussion, hopefully. The one that the students kind of help me co-create and then maybe even add to it depending on what they find out. Then we can actually look at how they share their learning, both mathematically and artistically. So how are they going to share what they found out? So it'll be using different tools in the classroom, and with the idea being, how can we create an artistic masterpiece that shows our understanding of math, which will be kind of like the math they've learned. And they'll be able to kind of hopefully explore the idea of space, which will hopefully get into some of that geometry concept, which when talking to Matthew Aldridge online was something that he noticed, and I did actually notice it too, that geometry was not really mentioned in What is Math. So it would be neat to see if now they start to kind of explore that concept of geometry and different shapes and the use of space and all of that, which will also kind of come up with some of the elements of design for the arts as well. And then, assuming that everything goes as planned, then on Friday we're going to start our bigger project, which is we're going to start planning for the opening of Aviva's awesome abstract art gallery. I have noticed that arts is something that the students are really into, so hopefully this will kind of help generate from their interests as well. It will certainly target some of the specific areas that we're looking at. And what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to create an artistic piece that shows their understanding of a number. So we're going to have to look at the idea of number and explain how math is represented in this art piece. And they're going to have to actually kind of explain and show their work, because we're going to get some classes to actually visit our art gallery, which again, I think links to our bigger school improvement plan focus, which is that idea of creating that authentic, meaningful work for students. Now they're going to have a reason in which to think about their artistic piece. How are they going to create it? We can look at some different ones. I'm even thinking if we looked at the Hamilton Art Gallery, look at even the idea that they created that big, huge bus that was like the artistic piece that actually was not made from like painting or anything like that. So even just for them to see that there are different ways to create the works of art, and how are they going to make it, how are they going to use the space, how are they going to represent the number during it, so they can look at different groupings and things like that, which will also hopefully help with some of the counting piece and explaining how they got to that number, and kind of going into a bigger thought of number itself. And hopefully as we start to arrange things in the classroom with our numbers, we can look at, oh, how could we arrange it like the smaller number versus the bigger, and where could it go within the room so that people could see it. And then what they're going to need to do is they're also going to need to create a song that they think matches their piece and can be played during our art gallery tour. So again, this gives them another reason to work on the idea of counting, making the beats, and they don't necessarily need to match it to their number. So if they for instance had, say, the number 16, they don't need a song that only has 16 beats in it, but they will need to actually count the beats that they had and look within the patterns and things at that with those beats. So that will hopefully help as well. And then I'm hoping, because they can kind of pick various numbers, it can be differentiated depending on where the students' needs are at. And we can again also kind of work on that one-to-one correspondence and counting skills. And from an artistic piece, it also links to the elements of design too. And I'm thinking, because I was kind of thinking about what was said during our staff meeting the other day, is that we can also look at building the success criteria together so that students understand what they need to do to ensure that they've done well. So how do they know they've met the expectations? What do they need to improve on? So if we can work on building that success criteria together, we can keep kind of reflecting back on it, and the students can use that as their guide as they create their piece too. And then we can use the iPads and the tech piece to also record our art gallery display when we actually have the art gallery, so that it can be shown and shared with parents and other people too.